Just as it seemed like that play-in tourney was never going to end, we finally do get to the actual postseason in the NBA, and there are a number of great storylines. One of the storylines, though, that is not great is the number of key injuries already. Joining us to talk about that is a board-certified orthopedic surgeon. He spent 17 seasons as the head team physician for the Chargers. You can find his analysis at Sports Injury Central and their website, sicscore.com. Of course, I'm talking about the pro football doc, Dr. David Chao. Doc, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And I did spend a little time working with the Timberwolves and Bulls, but not as extensive with the Chargers, so more than just football. But the NBA injuries, as you talk about, Jim, so much for load management all season, huh?
Yeah,
Game
right?
one of a lot of these playoff series, and look at all these injuries.
All right, so let's talk about that. And I was going to bring up your NBA background as well, because you do know that too, Doc, and you have spent time there. Let's talk about the Lakers and the Grizz first as they get ready for the start of Game 2. What did you see in the video of Ja Morant going down with that hand injury in Sunday's loss? And then what do you think his status will be going forward?
Well, obviously he didn't finish the game, and there's been lots of pessimism and frustration on Ja Morant's part. But as we look at the video looks bad the way his fingers are bent back and then his wrist is bent. But we didn't expect any fractures, and there are no fractures. Is there soft tissue damage? Yes. Is there swelling where it was reported that he couldn't even unball a sock? Yes. And the swelling the first day after is probably worse. But they don't play until 3 days after the injury. So even though all the reports are negative, we're cautiously optimistic that, A, he's got a chance to play in Game 2, and also that he certainly isn't done for the series. So we're expecting a quicker return for Ja Morant than most people are right now.
And Pro Football Doc, a.k.a. / Pro Basketball Doc / Pro Most Sports Doc, joining us right now, Dr. David Chao. So as always, Doc, with Anthony Davis, when he plays, he can dominate. He's a force. We know this. But more often than not, his availability is a big question mark. He suffered that stinger Sunday before he came back in the second half. Is that an issue or something needed to be tracked with AD for the rest of the series? Where does that leave him?
Well, it is something that needs to be tracked. To his credit, he came back in the second half and played better. At least his numbers were better in the second half than even in the first half. But once a nerve is, quote, tweaked or irritated, or he had the temporary feeling of shooting down his arm and where he couldn't move initially, it went away very quickly, which bodes well. However, it can be irritated again, and it is something to watch going forward.
Talking to the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chao from the Sports Injury Central site. Doc, what about Tyler Hero of the Heat? He broke his right hand diving for that loose ball Sunday. Does that definitively rule him out for the rest of the playoffs should Miami advance?
No, it doesn't definitively rule him out. It's likely a metacarpal fracture, the way he got his finger caught and twisted. Potential for plate and surgery, but with or without surgery, yeah, it's probably a 4 to 6 week recovery timeline. 4 weeks is on the optimistic side. And the way that the series are scheduled out this time, I mean, it's about 2 weeks for the first round and 2 weeks for the second round. If he gets to the conference finals, he's got a chance. Now, Miami is the 8th seed, and they got to stay alive. But if Miami stays alive, Hero does have a potential chance to return, but that's going to take the Heat winning a couple of series.
All right, so what about Giannis? Now, the Bucks are optimistic that Giannis will play tomorrow after going down with that back injury on Sunday. The x-rays were negative. How limited might he be, and what do you think the Bucks training staff can do for him to get him ready for tomorrow? Where do you come out on that?
We anticipate a high 6 score for Giannis. We're in the mid to high 80s now. We'll probably upgrade it to the 90s. When he fell in game, we were optimistic. Now, spasm got him. But the way that he fell, it was a hard fall. But that's not going to be a fracture. That's not going to be a nerve issue. That's not going to be long-term. In no way, shape, or form are we calling Giannis soft. I mean, the spasm had him locked up and he couldn't finish the game. But spasm doesn't last multiple days. The medical staff will be able to get on that. We expect a fully healthy Giannis for this next contest. And that was our opinion in game when it happened. And now there are leaked reports that it's probably going to happen, that he'll be fine.
So, Doc, when you say 6 score, for those who don't know, does that represent a probability of him playing? What goes into the 6 score in this case?
Well, Sports Injury Central score, SIC, or SIC score, 100 is you've got no issues and whatever, and very few players are at that. But 90s means you're in the 90s, 90% health. From a fantasy perspective, 90-some percent or 95% of what your normal output might be. And, of course, the different scores can be lower than that. But we're optimistic on Giannis for this.
We're talking to the Pro Football Doc about the NBA playoffs. Doc, what about the Clippers? They're looking to take a 2-0 series lead over the Suns. But again, they're not going to have Paul George. He has not played since March 21st due to that sprained knee. If the Clips do move on to the second round, do you think he'll be ready to go at that point?
I think he's getting close. Yes, that was our thought, that he would miss at least the first round when it happened. This was a knee hyperextension injury with likely bone bruise. Some people compared it to Giannis the previous playoffs, where he returned very quickly. But that was a chronic issue on Giannis, so there was no new damage. Paul George is on pace for some sort of return, I believe, in the second round, if the Clippers are there.
All right, so we're talking to the Pro Football Doc. Before you go, you are the Pro Football Doc. Let's move to the NFL. Patrick Mahomes said yesterday that he's still rehabbing that high ankle injury that he suffered in the divisional round of the playoffs in January. I'm curious what your reaction is to that, and should there be grave concerns or concerns at all if he's not 100% yet?
No, I mean, it was a high ankle sprain. I mean, in the NFL, it's always never too high, never too low. Never too low that he had the high ankle sprain. And we talked on your podcast and other things about how we thought that Patrick Mahomes would actually be very effective on the high ankle sprain because he doesn't throw from a stable platform. He's not a 5 or 7 step drop and drive off the back foot. He can wrong foot throw, off axis, off platform throws, and he played very well in the Super Bowl. The fact that he's still rehabbing and has some ankle issue is of essentially zero concern. It's a high ankle sprain. It was always a significant injury. He wasn't faking it. It's just part of the normal offseason process. No concerns there. A lot more concern for Brock Purdy than Patrick Mahomes.
Pro Football Doc joining us, so that should be good news for Chiefs fans. I was going to go there next. In fact, I'm curious about this. So Brock Purdy, Doc said, and we know he had elbow surgery on March 10th, but then said that when asked, what about next year? How do you feel about next year? Are you going to be able to play? He said, I don't know. You know, based on what you know about that injury, what is a typical timetable, and what do you make of what he said?
Yeah, exactly what we said at Radio Row when we saw each other and chatted a little bit. He hadn't even had the surgery then, yet the reports were he'd be fine for training camp. Obviously, when he finally saw the surgeon, it was delayed. I've said all along, this is indeed an injury to the Tommy John ligament. Is it classic Tommy John reconstruction surgery like most baseball players for a chronic injury? No. But it's still surgery on the Tommy John ligament. Okay, it's a repair, but what I've said all along is it's possible he could be ready to play at the start of the season, but it is far from a guarantee that he will do so. Look, Kyle Shanahan even said it could be 4 weeks before he's back. And now Brock Purdy's being honest about his situation. Good, he's got the brace off, but that's a long way from throwing and being 100%. And you have to also be a little cautious, even if he makes it early season. Here's a young quarterback without any off-season development. So it's something to watch for the 49ers, and it remains to be seen if he'll be ready week 1. And I think kudos to Brock Purdy. He actually was being honest in that he wasn't sure. He had to take it one day at a time. And that's where we've been on this the whole time.
Talking to Pro Football Doc. Doc, what about, one last thought, how about Tua? Like, are the Dolphins almost out of the woods with Tua, or frankly, will they never be out of the woods with him? What's his status?
Well, you know, in terms of concussions, of course, he had the 2 documented concussions, right? But others have had more than that. Look, you know, once you have concussions, are you potentially more likely to? Potentially, yes, but it has to be judged independently. I've always felt that Tua would be able to return to play next season, and obviously he's going to. It's something they're just going to have to watch and be careful with for the rest of his career, because of every time you get a concussion, potentially you're more likely to get it. But this morning, as you came on the air, we celebrate some good news. As we've talked about, last time I chatted with you was Damar Hamlin, and we were saying that, look, the option to return to football, we're expecting it to be open to him. And today he was cleared, and he's back with the Buffalo Bills. So some good news there.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Doc. So why don't you elaborate on that really quickly? What is your reaction to that news, and what's that say about him?
Well, it says he's what he's been all along. He's all the stuff he's doing for heart health and so forth is awesome. He's a great kid. He's making a great recovery. We always felt that physically he would be able to return to football. Now, we didn't want to jump the gun. We waited till he was out of the hospital. With this isolated cardiac event with associated lung injury, anticipating no long-term residual, which left and / leaves the option of returning to football open to him. And today he's on the practice field and back with the Bills. So, as scary as that all looked in real time, with this type of injury, thankfully there's no long-lasting residual, and that's something to be celebrated, and it's something that we expected, and this is one case that we're thrilled to be right about.
Really good news. Really good news. He is the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chao. You can find his analysis. In fact, he's got an entire staff, and they cover virtually every major sport. In fact, they do. It's at Sports Injury Central. The website is sicscore.com. Doc, really appreciate it. Thanks for elevating the conversation.